Okay, so we are getting close to the end of this course. Before we finish, I would like to explain something to you about signatures, which is part of a public key crypto. I have some conclusions, and then as a bonus, I have some post-quantum cryptography for you. So what are signatures? So previously we talked about authentication, which is when two parties share the same secret key and they want to prove that they know the secret key, or they want to send a message and they want to authenticate this message, showing that whoever signed the message knew the secret key. So authentication is a symmetric scheme. Signatures is then the equivalent, but just for public keys. So the idea for a signature is that you can authenticate without having met each other before, without sharing a secret key. So how does this work? So again, everybody has a private and a public key. And when you sign a message, then you use the private key. And then when someone wants to verify that this message was signed by you, then they check if it verifies, but here they use the public key. So it's in a way opposite of encryption. And with encryption, you encrypt with the public key, and then you decrypt with the private key. Here you sign with the private key, and then you verify with the public key. Yeah, so encryption of the signature can only, encryption of the signature, so in order to encrypt or in order to sign, you need to know the secret key, but anyone can authenticate, or anyone can check that this works. Then of course, the issue here is that, okay, so then what Bob is verifying is that the person who sent this message has the secret key connected to this public key. That's all he can verify. And then the question is, of course, who is this public key then connected to? In order to know that, how that's solved on the internet is then that you have these trusted parties that hold on to a bunch of public keys, and so these trusted parties on the internet, they have the public keys and they know who they're connected to. For example, like Microsoft might have a bunch of public keys connected to them, and then you have this trusted third party on the internet that knows that this public key is connected to Microsoft. And then if you're Bob and you receive some message and the sender says, "Oh, I'm Microsoft," and you go and get the public key from this third party. You get the public key for Microsoft, and then you check whether it was indeed authenticated by whoever has the secret key for Microsoft. And then, of course, that just raises the level another level, because then how do you trust this third party and so on? And there's, and I don't think I'm not an expert in these practical things, but there are some very interesting YouTube videos on this. So I do recommend, if you're interested, to go have a look. Okay, but anyway, I hope you agree that this is a useful thing to be able to do, to be able to sign messages in a way so that messages can be authenticated even if two people have never met before. And now that we know RSA, actually, it's not so hard to show you how to do signatures using RSA. So yeah, so the idea is simply in order to sign a message, what you do is you take the message and you raise it. Okay, so the signatures, you can have many different signature schemes, and you can in particular build one using RSA, and this is what I'll describe. And in this signature scheme, the private and the public key are actually the same. And the way that you sign a message is you raise it to the power D. And the way that you then verify a message is then you take the signature and you raise it to the power E, which is public, part of the public key, and then you check whether that's equal to the message. Yeah, so in a way, like for RSA, the signature is just sort of the opposite of encryption. You sort of decrypt the message in a way. That's how you sign it, and only the owner of the private key can decrypt. And then encrypting is the inverse operation. So then going back to get the message again is then raising to the power E, and this anyone can do, and then you can check if you get the same message. And again, remember, for this to work, you need to send both the message and the signature, because the verifier needs to know the message. The verifier needs to know what should the signature, if I raise it to the power E, what should that be equal to? Okay, so now you've seen an example of a signature scheme as well. And you've also seen why it's the same type of people that treat signatures as encryption, because at least for some schemes, the two are just inverses of each other. They're very, very similar math that you need. Okay, so that was actually the end of the main topics, and I jumped to conclusions. So what have we talked about? We've talked about modern ciphers, we've talked about symmetric ciphers, or in particular AES, and we've talked about asymmetric ciphers, or in particular, I mean, we've only mentioned RSA, but there's of course, and we've only mentioned RSA and AES. For symmetric ciphers, AES is really the main one, the recommended one to use. For asymmetric, RSA is not necessarily the main one. The reason why I describe this is because, first of all, history, it was the first one. It's the most well-known one. It's actually still in use today, which also makes, so for those reasons, I think it's a good one to describe. Also, it shows up in many cryptography challenges because, as I mentioned yesterday, RSA is actually what you might call brittle. There's a lot of ways to attack RSA. You need to use it just right for it to be secure. There's many ways that you can use it wrong, and that, of course, leads to some good CTF challenges. So we've talked about these two schemes, and we talked about, in general, what is symmetric and asymmetric encryption. We talked about authentication and signatures, which are, again, I mean, different ways to authenticate. In authentication, you need to share the same secret key like you do in symmetric encryption. Signatures, you can use this public key system, so you can authenticate messages even if you've never met. And of course, you need to trust these third parties on the internet, and that raises all sorts of other problems. But that is actually how it works today. So you can. It's nice that when you get an update, for example, for your Windows, you know that it was really issued by Windows and not by someone impersonating Windows. Right, we talked about some basic attacks, and we talked about spotting weaknesses, or this weakest link principle. Yeah, you unfortunately don't have any chance to ask questions today. So for quantum computers, yeah, I talked a little bit about like what might you do if you have any questions, and I think the easiest thing to do is get in touch with the organizers of these training sessions, and then either they can answer or they can forward the question to me. Alternatively, if it's a more general question, I encourage you to go search the net, or if you can't find it there, then ask a question on Stack Overflow or one of the other question asking services that exist on the internet. Okay, so we get to this final part, which is maybe the one I'm most interested in, because this is where I do my research. So we talk about quantum algorithms. Right, okay, so this is how I want to go about it. I don't know if you've heard about this yet, but quantum computers are currently being built. And quantum computers, they are in some ways completely different from normal computers, and in some ways completely the same. And they're based on quantum mechanics, so they're based on like behaviors of atoms on like the very smallest level that we can interact with atoms on. And quantum computers, they exploit something called superposition, where these atoms, once you get to quantum states, then you have to deal with something called superpositions, where an atom is not just in one state; it might be in multiple different states at once. And this is just like weird to understand, right? And it's something where you're like, oh, I don't believe it. But I mean, it's how the world works. So it's, I mean, and yeah, I'm getting to a little bit of issues because I'm not a physicist either. But so what I have to do is just accept that apparently you can have atoms that, like atoms can have spins, so they can spin one way or they can spin the other way, and they can spin clockwise or counterclockwise, and apparently you can have atoms that both spin one way and the other way at the same time, or they are in a superposition where in one state they're in a superposition of two states where in one state it spins one way and the other state it spins the other. And if you want to know more about this, I think YouTube videos that with physicists is probably better. But as cryptographers, we can exploit these superpositions. So what it means is we can build quantum computers, and these quantum computers, they can actually in a normal computer you work with zeros and ones, and each bit is either a 0 or 1. With a quantum computer, you can work with these states that are superpositions. So you can have, instead of just working with one byte, you can work on a byte that's actually a superposition of all the possible bytes. So you can have, like, with 8 registers in your quantum computer, you can work on all the different bytes at once. And this gives quantum computers some special powers that can be used to break encryption. And I wish I haven't prepared slides for this, so unfortunately I'm not going to go into more details than this. But this means that quantum computers, they can run certain algorithms that you can't run on a normal computer. They can run, for example, quantum Fourier transform, Simon's algorithm, Shor's algorithm, Grover's algorithm, and these last ones are all from the 1990s. These algorithms, they work against all public key encryption that we use today. And that's, of course, an issue, and that would be a major issue if we had quantum computers today. And luckily, you might say, they are not quite there yet. So the quantum computers are being built. IBM, Google, MIT, all the big players in the tech scene, they're working on this. And they're constantly improving the quantum computers, but they're not yet at a stage where these quantum computers are large enough and stable enough that you can actually use them to break the encryption that we use today. This is constantly under development, and therefore we need to quantum secure our communication. We need to find out what encryption schemes should we use in the future that are not susceptible to these attacks. Right. So yeah, okay. So these attacks, they can one thing that they can do, like one of the algorithm is Shor's algorithm, and with Shor's algorithm you can do fast factorization, meaning you can break RSA, and you can do fast discrete logarithm problem, which means you can break Hellman, El-Gamal, an elliptic curve cryptography is also broken. These are some of the standard ones in use today. And the exponential power of quantum systems is extremely powerful. Like from what was before billions of years, now like these systems can be broken in a few minutes. Well, that's what we expect from our experiments so far. And this is, of course, a big problem for cryptography. Symmetric key crypto, AES, there's not yet a very strong attack against AES. So for now, it seems like symmetric key is actually safe. But without a public key encryption, of course, we have this problem with key distribution. So we need public key crypto as well. To elaborate a little bit, AES is the AES is not completely broken by quantum computers, but there are attacks by quantum computers on AES, and that's actually the reason why AES also exists with larger keys. Why it's in the future it will not be enough to use AES with 128-bit key. We need to go to 192 or 256 in order to protect against quantum computers. But at least for AES, we can do that. We can just increase the key size, and then we'll be secure. For RSA, the mathematical problem is just no longer hard. It's no longer it's not significantly harder to break the encryption than it is to actually run the encryption algorithm. So no matter how large, if we make the parameters larger, then we're just going to make encryption slower, and then decryption or breaking the system will be equally slow. So we're not there's no gap between how difficult it is to encrypt and decrypt knowing the key, and how difficult it is to decrypt not knowing the key. Or the gap is not big enough for us to use for encryption. Okay, so what do we do? What do we do now that these quantum computers are coming? So what we do is we look at alternates. We look at alternative candidates. So we look at encryption that's not based on factorization and not based on the discrete logarithm problem. And some of the most successful propositions here have been lattice-based crypto, or code-based crypto, or hash-based crypto. So here we look for these, and hash-based crypto is only for authentication and signatures. There's not yet an encryption scheme based on hash-based crypto. So hash-based, you've learned about hash functions, right? And you can use hash functions for authentication, right? You can use them for max. It's also a way to build a signature scheme out of hash functions. So signature schemes, remember here, the two parties don't need to share the same key, but there's a way to still authenticate in these situations using hash-based systems. However, to build public key crypto systems, we need, or to build encryption systems, we need different hard problems. So we go to other parts of mathematics, like lattice-based crypto or code-based crypto. And here we take, and okay, I mean, I'm in code-based crypto, so I'm presenting them as if like they're equally popular. And now it seems like lattice-based crypto is actually gaining the upper hand. It seems like lattice-based cryptos, they're more like the systems that have been developed based on hard problems from lattices. These systems just seem like they give more all-round good encryption schemes. Whereas the most famous code-based crypto systems, meaning like encryption schemes that are based on hard problems from coding theory, these encryption schemes are, I mean, they might be good for some things, but for example, one of the issues with them is that they have very large keys. So these public keys are in the order of megabytes instead of in the order of kilobytes for lattice-based. So that's why lattice-based is the preferred choice, as it seems right now. Do I have more to say about this? Yeah, so this is of course really exciting, and there's an international debate happening now, and it's organized by an institute called the National Institute for Standards and Technology, located in the US. And it's of course so that many countries, they have their own national institutes for standards and technology, but US is such an important player, and here in Denmark it seems like, and many other, like I think, like all the cryptographers from all over the world, we're looking to the US because they're just a very big player. But I know that Denmark doesn't have its own National Institute for Standards and Technology, so I think we'll just I think that might be one on the European level. But I don't actually know this. I know that Norway and Germany, they have their own. So they're of course looking to the US to see what they're doing, but they're also making their own decisions. Yeah, that was a little bit of introduction to post-quantum cryptography. So what have you learned today? You've had this introduction to modern symmetric encryption and authentication. You've learned about possible exploits, the concept of the weakest link, and you've learned about exhaustive key search, taking advantage of paired randomness. You have hands-on experience with practical attacks. You've had an introduction to public key cryptography and signatures. And then you have hands-on experience with encrypting and decrypting RSA. And that was all for today. Good luck in the competition. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed these slides.